I'm Lauren Conlin, and welcome to the Outlier podcast from Pop Crime TV. And this is week 6 of the United States versus Sean Combs, your weekly recap. It was a short week, unexpectedly, or somewhat unexpectedly this week, because a juror ended up calling out sick on Wednesday, and they apparently had symptoms of vertigo. They were on the train, and then their partner had called the court after they had to turn around and go home. And again, this was on Wednesday, June 18th. So yes, the whole day had to be canceled because of that. And then on on Thursday, the 19th, there was already no court planned because of Juneteenth. And then Friday, June 20th, there was already a half day planned. So this episode may be just a bit shorter, but I'll go through everything that happened this week via my Crime Junkie jury update. And yeah, I mean, it's crazy that week 7, by next week, the defense will most likely rest and we will hear closing arguments and then potentially jury charges, etc. by week 8, I'm assuming. I mean, listen, it could be week 7 as well, but I always want to give a little bit of a grace period because things happen, things pop up, etc. So, okay, without further ado, I will begin with the updates from week 6 of the Sean Combs trial. As of this morning, June 16th, juror number 6 has officially been removed from the jury. Now, on the evening of June 15th, the defense wrote a letter to the judge saying that if juror number 6 was in fact removed, they would move for a mistrial. They are really honing in on the fact that they believe there is a racial bias here, and it's just not fair because this man, was one of the few Black jurors on the jury. Now, I did see his replacement today, who is also a male, and he did look to be significantly older than the former juror. So they quickly brought up a potential second juror issue, though we didn't really get into it. So I will keep a close eye on how that unfolds. We started the day off with a summary witness, Ananya Sankar. If you heard me on the live stream today with Brandy Churchwell during the verdict watch for Karen Reed, I did discuss some of this already. But just a quick recap, she is a paralegal specialist at the U.S. Attorney's Office, and her job is essentially collecting evidence for trial and just going through everything to ensure its accuracy. So we saw a lot of charts, a lot of graphs, a lot of text messages, a lot of BlackBerry emails, and some recordings. And all of this information that she was going over came from KK's phone, Christina Karam, who was Diddy's right-hand chief of staff for pretty much most of what we've been seeing during the duration of the trial. So I want to say 2008 until 2024. But what we saw was information from her phone from March of 2016 up until February of 2024. We saw text messages between KK and other assistants, text messages between KK and Cassie, between KK and Jane. And again, all seeming to corroborate what we have previously heard. So there's texts about getting cash to bring to hotels, cash to get from security, to give to Diddy or Cassie at these hotels. We saw texts from Jane to KK asking about $5,000 to $10,000 in cash that she could give to Diddy. We saw text messages about Cassie talking to KK about some of the violence that she's endured at Diddy's hands and how she can't do it anymore. Coordinating hotel stays. This is KK and other assistants. And then KK talking about, I believe it's drugs. They're talking about a package from Guido. She asked Jane to pick it up. And then we saw other text messages involving things that need to be taken care of when it comes to Guido. We heard audio recordings from Sean Combs to Christina Karam saying, hey, can you take care of that? Meaning Guido. And then we saw some text messages and eventually recordings from December and November of 2023 between Jane and KK and then Jane and Diddy. And one of the exchanges was really Jane telling KK how coerced she felt, how she felt exploited, and also how Diddy was blackmailing her about a sex tape video that he was threatening to show to her, quote, baby daddy. And then KK wrote something like, I haven't talked to him in a while, which I found to be odd because she was his right hand. And all of a sudden, Cassie's lawsuit drops in 2023 in November. And all of a sudden, here we are a month later and KK saying, well, I haven't really talked to him. We also heard recordings or voice notes and different recordings of audio conversations, actual phone calls, and then separate voice notes. But one of the audio calls was between Diddy and Jane. And we had kind of heard this one before where he just says, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't know. I thought we were just kinky like that type of thing. And he asks how they can move on. What else? Oh, then at the end or before the lunch break, I should say, we saw text messages between D-Rock and Diddy and then D-Rock and Mia. And we had already kind of seen these during Mia's direct testimony, but what we kind of saw and how it was laid out for us was the fact that D-Rock and Diddy were texting. And by the way, this was November of 2023. And D-Rock was using some nice little heart emojis saying, love you, bro. I'm here for you, bro. Love you. And Diddy would say, love you. Thanks so much. That means a lot. And again, this was pretty much a few days after Cassie's lawsuit had first dropped. And then we kind of go into February of 2024, where they talk about meeting up. And then D-Rock says, I'm going to hit up Mia. And then after he would hit up Mia, it would show him going and telling Diddy what Mia said. And then at one point he was like, yeah, I talked to her. It sounds like she's out of the country type of thing. And we would see D-Rock text Mia saying, Diddy just wants to talk, or he would call him Puff, like Puff just wants to ask you some questions. He doesn't want anything from you, et cetera, et cetera. And then during the cross-examination by Tenny Garagos, we did get some context around what I thought was kind of confusing during direct. So during Mia's direct examination, she was texting with D-Rock. We saw this thread. And at one point, he offers to send her something. And the prosecutor was like, what did you take that as? What did you think he wanted to send you? And she said money. And I didn't really understand how she knew it was money or how, he meant money. And then we saw a text from Mia as, they were chatting back and forth casually where she kind of says, I'm out of Skrilla and, but it's okay though. And that's when D-Rock's like, let me send you something. And she's like, no. So I think the defense was trying to point that out. Like, look, she said it first. And we also saw text messages where the defense wanted us to know that as soon as D-Rock said, hey, it looks like she's out of the country, Diddy stopped contacting Mia because we actually saw 6 outgoing calls to Mia in February of 2024. So, yes, then after lunch, we saw a special agent from the government who was testifying to more charts and evidence that was organized by the government. And basically, it was just more corroboration of travel records. We saw travel records and flight records, itineraries for a number of escorts, Clayton Howard, The Punisher, Paul Arthur, and text messages between Diddy and Jules Theodore, who was also, we saw some flight itineraries. We saw texts between Cassie and escorts setting different things up. What else? It was a lot of these. It was a lot of texts back and forth. And then they would also match some of these texts between Cassie and the escorts to hotel invoices. So if she was like, meet at room 416 at the Trump Hotel, we would then see, the following day, a checkout invoice for the Trump Hotel room, et cetera, Frank Black, the same corroborating statements that we saw previously. Now, I think the most interesting part of the day was when the jury was shown 3 separate videos with headphones. We were not allowed to see in the gallery. Neither was the overflow room, of course. But each video or 2 videos were about 11 minutes and the third video was 39 minutes. They played about a minute and a half of each video. And the second video, we definitely heard moaning. We we're all looking at each other like the press. We were like, okay, I think this is an S tape, a sex tape. So yeah, not certain, but pretty certain, especially because one female juror also looked totally disgusted while the male jurors were like watching it pretty intently. And yeah, that was probably the most, I don't want to say like it kind of woke us all up, but a lot of this testimony can be a bit mundane. And then we ended at around 3, so thank goodness it was a bit early. And the government had just said they want the defense to narrow their witness list down. They have apparently a very long witness list. They'll never be able to call all of these witnesses, Maureen Comey said. So they had said by Wednesday, this Wednesday, which is the 18th, they will have their final-ish list, at least crossing off who they don't want to call. And the government said they will be done with their case by Wednesday. I think they're planning to call one other summary witness and then a former personal assistant, Brendan Paul. And then the defense, their first witness they're going to call is Vashta from Bad Boy HR. So yeah, that was the extent of today. So thank you so much for watching the recap, day 24, the United States versus Sean Combs. I'll be back for day 25. We are on day 25 of the United States versus Sean Combs. And this video will most likely be a little bit short. I think some of the, or I guess most of my videos have been shorter and shorter as the government's case comes to a close. They were supposed to close on Wednesday, the 18th, or they were supposed to rest their case. Now Maureen Comey says they may rest on Friday, which is the 20th, because Tenny Garagos's cross of the special agent on the stand today, who was a summary witness, went a little bit long. But with that being said, I would say the biggest thing today, or the biggest news, again, on day 25 here, was that the judge was very angry with both the defense and the government when he first walked in this morning, because there was a leak of some sort when it comes to sealed information. Now, we are not totally sure what this leak is. I say we, meaning the press, the public. I believe it pertains to a juror, a second juror issue that was brought up because, I mean, listen, I don't know, but I know that there was an article written by a media publication that had some details about this possible juror issue. And how would they know unless somebody told them from either of these teams, because this information was not public. So at the end of the day today, they closed the courtroom, kicked us all out to go over everything. So maybe we'll find out more tomorrow. Let's see. But with that being said, there is just basically, we went through the finish of the direct examination today. We went through more charts and graphs of flight itineraries, matching up with text messages, and then invoices from hotels. So we saw, and we also saw the Amex charges behind these incidents that were described in the different, wow, brain fart. We saw Amex bills that matched up with these charges, the hotel, the flights, etc. Oh my gosh, talk much, Lauren. So, for example, we saw Jules Theodore in August of 2009. We saw his flight itinerary from LA to NYC, and then we saw Cassie corresponding with him, and we also saw the London hotel invoice from this excursion. And then we saw another instance of that with an escort, Clayton Howard, aka Dave. We saw something from September of 2014, a travel invoice for Clayton from JFK to LA. And then we saw a hotel booked, the Four Seasons, by one of the assistants. And then we saw text messages corresponding with that. We also saw which banks Diddy paid his Amex cards with as well. And by the way, his Amex charges, they range from $108,000 all the way up until almost $1 million. He had one month that was $918,000 in charges. And we also saw damages on these hotel invoices. One in particular was a carpet and drapes for $500, which we had seen before. But then there was a big one from 2012. It was a $46,000 charge. And this was from the Intercontinental. It's a little bit unclear, but I think that there was major oil damage on some of the furniture. And then we got to March of 2016. They put together this timeline of events that really centered around the Intercontinental Hotel of video, the beating. And what they did was they put together Cassie's text messages setting up this FO with an escort. So we saw those first, and then we kind of moved right to the missed calls from Sean Combs to Cassie starting at 11:28 a.m. There was 8 missed calls right away. And we know that's because she had left the hotel at that point. The beating we saw in the hallway took place around 11 a.m. So the first call at 11:28 makes perfect sense. Then we saw more calls. There was 5 more calls in the second block of time starting at 11:36 a.m. There was text messages from Diddy to Cassie, call me now. And then Cassie she said, Jules left. You should be fine as long as you don't disturb the other guests. She was very short with him. And he called her 4 or 5 more times, said the cops are here. And we had already seen all these messages going back and forth. So that wasn't really a shock. But the timeline itself just really took us through all of these messages. Then the messages between KK and Eddie Garcia, the security guard that gave up the footage, and then KK and another assistant named Eli Marone. Eli was trying to get the footage, and then Cassie and KK, where KK was trying to talk to Cassie, saying, can you pick up his calls? Can you do something? And then D-Rock and Cassie as well. And then there was an exchange where the next day where Diddy asks D-Rock how Cassie was doing, and D-Rock said, he said, her face don't look bad. She's good. She's smiling and eating breakfast. You should call her. And then we see calls to Cassie. And then we see the back and forth calls from Eddie Garcia and Diddy, which end on March 25th, 2016, which was Easter that year. And we know that he had contacted Eddie Garcia to make sure everything was good and nobody had talked about the hotel video after they took care of it. So then the cross started, and Tenny Garagos's cross, I think her cross is very effective in terms of I've said this before, she seems like she's one of your girlfriends and you're just kind of having a conversation with her, and then she'll kind of throw a zinger in. But she just questioned the special agent, and she said, look, you've been a special agent for 10 years. Is that right? Yes. You didn't exactly work on this case. You weren't investigating this case, correct? You were just going through all of the charts and graphs to ensure accuracy. And she said, yes. And then Tenny pointed out some instances where the charts and graphs weren't exactly accurate because they had inferred that Cassie was participating in an event when Cassie was actually in South Africa. It was December 8th, 2015. She was in South Africa at this time, and there were text messages between KK and another assistant saying they left, go clean up type of thing. And Tenny was like, so who's they? Cassie wasn't here. She was in South Africa. And the special agent, she wasn't aware. She just said, yeah, I just analyzed what they gave me. They didn't give me anything more there. Then the jury saw clips of the same videos as the day prior. So we know that those videos were S-tapes or freak-off videos, but this time the jury didn't have any crazy faces they were making. They were shown different clips from these videos. I think I mentioned that one was about 39 minutes, the other 2 were 11 or 12 minutes. So different clips, no faces being made. I did see a female juror take some notes at one point, and then at the end of all the videos, I saw another female juror kind of make a face like, kind of moving her lips around, almost thinking. And then let's see. Oh, and we found out that those videos came from the Frank Black guest user on one of Cassie's devices that she handed over to the government, one of the MacBooks. And then really Tenny Garagos spent the remainder of the afternoon pointing out more text messages that we didn't see, but were during this time period that she was referencing in the direct, of Cassie being very complicit to FOs, you know, saying like, I want to do it with you. It's that word H. I'm trying to say I'm corny, but with an H. And she would say this to him a lot and say, you know, I'm looking forward to these FOs. I really want to be with you. I'm not going to get into the explicit text, but yeah, there was a fair amount. And then they would show texts between Cassie and Diddy, kind of reminding us that he was also a regular human, where he would say, what do you want to do in New York this weekend? And Cassie's like, I don't know, let's do something different and fun. And he's like, great, I got us Book of Mormon tickets. And then we saw really loving text messages from Cassie saying, oh, I love you so much. You make me a better daughter, a better sister, a better XYZ. I mean, really just lovey-dovey stuff here. And text messages from Cassie saying, I wish we could have FO'd before you left. And then another time where she said she wished that she wouldn't get so high and she would be more careful with these escorts, insinuating that she wanted to use protection. And then Diddy would say, I'm sorry, let's be more careful. Let's not do that again, trying to show that he's understanding. And yeah. Then, there was like a game that Cassie texted, like a role play game they wanted us to see. And that was the extent of the cross. And then during redirect, they just brought up some instances of text messages, really trying to just mic drop us here. Where the last text message we actually saw was Cassie saying, nothing good comes from FOs. You treat me like you're Ike Turner. And this was right around March of 2016, which was the Intercontinental Hotel video. So that was the gist of today. Tomorrow, we will see Brendan Paul, Diddy's former assistant, testify, and that should be the end of the government's case for witnesses. So we'll see what happens, but I will be back for a day 26 update, and thank you all for watching. We are on day 27 of the United States versus Sean Combs, and we had a half day today in court, and I want to go over some scheduling things really quick right off the bat. The government will be done with their case, 95% chance, end of day on Monday. And the defense actually surprised us all when they said that their case in chief will most likely only take 1 to 2 days. So the defense could rest by Wednesday afternoon, and then closing arguments could be done Thursday or Friday. And that is huge. I mean, that would be amazing. But I won't take it conclusively just because things happen and you never know. But right off the bat, again, Diddy, this is just a side note. I don't know if maybe he was nervous, but he took a few more bathroom breaks today. And the jurors, they were interested, I think, in the witness, Brendan Paul, the first half of the morning, and they got a little bit bored towards the second half of the morning for the interview with the HSI special agent. But Brendan Paul, first witness of the day and second to last witness for the government, he was basically dubbed by the media in 2024 as Diddy's quote unquote drug mule. This could not be further from the truth here. Brendan Paul was arrested in March of 2024 at a Miami airport with a very small amount of cocaine on him that it turns out it was because he was cleaning a room, one of Diddy's rooms, and he just found it and he took it with him. And when he was at the airport, he forgot. And yes, he was caught by the police, arrested, and he ended up telling us that the charges were dropped because he had a really good lawyer, and he has not seen or spoken to Diddy since March 25th, 2024, this arrest. And he also said that he did not snitch on Diddy. He didn't say whose it was to the police. He didn't say anything about that. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to sort of combine the direct and the cross, the information regarding Brendan Paul. I think that'll be a little bit easier to follow here. But Brendan Paul worked for Diddy for 18 months. He was 23 when he started the position, pretty much right out of college. And he was this really, is this intelligent college basketball player. He was a walk-on for Syracuse. He even played in an NCAA tournament in 2019. So he also said that Eli Marone, the assistant that worked with him, told him right off the bat, he said with him, get in, get out, and break up with your girlfriend, and you'll never see your family, when he started working for Diddy. And, that kind of meant this rigorous work schedule. But he testified that he worked between 80 and 100 hours a week, and he was paid a starting salary at $75K, and then he made it up to $100K. And he did testify at one point that he was awake for 3 days straight with some naps in between. But during the cross-examination, it was clarified that they were working on Diddy's album Love in 2023. And pretty much the whole team, including Diddy, was really staying awake trying to get this done. And Brendan Paul testified to Brian Steele, who did the cross, that it was kind of exhilarating. And it's not that he wanted to stay awake, but he wanted to prove his loyalty and be a part of the team. And he also said, Brendan Paul said, that it didn't affect him that much because he was still young. The government made sure to ask Brendan Paul about KK. How much communication did he have with KK? I think they're really trying to plug her in wherever they can as this alleged co-conspirator. And let's see. Oh, he talked about his duties, and he had a lot of mundane duties like suitcase packing, organization. He said that he packed some joints for Diddy, but this is legal in California, and he did a lot of this at his LA home. But he did say that he did do some errands for him that included getting drugs. So he mentioned these drug dealers like Guido and One Stop and Baby Girl. And it was clarified, though, the amount of drugs he got for him really were only between $100 and $500 worth. And he said that he did this between 5 and 10 times over the course of 18 months. He very rarely set up for these quote unquote hotel stays or these wild king nights. He said he did do it a bunch of times, but it wasn't necessarily something that he did all the time. He talked about wearing gloves for the cleanup. And it was, I think the prosecutor was like, why did you do this? Wear gloves. And he's like, to be sanitary. And I think it was Brian Steele had asked him if he communicated with Jane after these hotel nights. And he said yes. And he said, Brian Steele said, well, did Jane seem upset after? Did she seem like she didn't want to do it? Was she regretful? Was she just, not herself type of thing? And Brendan Paul's answer was absolutely not, meaning she was totally fine. What else? He testified that Diddy had him do drugs once in front of him, and he wanted him to test out this K2 drug, which is like Molly and ketamine. And Brendan Paul said he did it. He just took a little bit of it, but it didn't really bother him because he wanted to prove his loyalty to Diddy. And this was after Coachella. He also, let's see. He testified picking up prescription drugs for Diddy and also trying to get prescriptions for Diddy, not through a doctor. He testified that they would have text threads with assistants and KK. And there was like this one notes section where KK had written out Diddy's schedule. It was just kind of, I don't know. It was interesting to read that he had to celebrate Jane's birthday and go XYZ with Jane. And then 3 days later, it was like, hey, trip with Young Miami planned to Turks and Caicos. So never a dull moment for that guy, apparently. What else? Yeah, we heard about, or we saw a picture that Brendan Paul took of Baby Oil and Astroglide appearing to be very organized on a shelf. And he took this picture for another assistant so he could show him how to organize things, how they needed to be organized. And yeah, we saw a picture of a hotel after a freak off, which was, I don't want to say it was underwhelming, but I think a lot of us thought it would be a lot worse. It was like sheets covering the furniture, nothing too crazy, a couple things on the ground. And that was pretty much it for the direct by U.S. Attorney Slavic. And then Brian Steele's cross, I kind of already mentioned some of it, but he really wanted to point out that Brendan Paul was an impressive guy who would not be working for an alleged criminal. And Brendan Paul said no. And he said, well, did you think that there was any criminal activity going on in these hotel rooms for these Wild King nights? And Brendan Paul said no, but there was some objections here and there. But Brendan Paul said that he thought that it was just personal time for Diddy to be with his significant other and blow off some steam. Oh, and during the during the direct examination, Brendan Paul did testify that once he had to get cash from security to bring to Diddy at a hotel night, about $5,000. Just throwing that out there, and you'll need that for the redirect really quick. So yeah, so Brian Steele was just like, so you worked for him 18 months. You got drugs for him between 5 and 10 times under $500. You know, you were lucky to work for him. You felt lucky because he gave you all these opportunities, and Brendan Paul agreed to most of it. Again, the hesitation about Jane, was she hesitant? He said no. You never thought that, you never thought that King Knight's a criminal. No. Well, during the redirect, Slavic asked him, well, what did you think this money was for? Objection. And then she said, well, had you ever brought him cash for any other events or during any other times? And Brendan Paul said no. Yeah, that was pretty much it. And then the redirect ended with Slavic asking him, how do you feel about Mr. Combs today? And he said, it's complicated. He walked off the stand. Diddy didn't really even look at him at all. And that was that. And then we got some text messages that were put into evidence, just standalone text between Cassie and Diddy, and also Christina Coram and Diddy. And I think they were showing this text message between Christina Coram and Diddy because Diddy was basically saying that he didn't want Brendan Paul to set up any wild king nights. And I think they were trying to say, oh, look, Brendan Paul didn't really set these up anyway because Diddy didn't want him to. That's why his testimony wasn't, anything jaw-dropping. But the ones between Cassie and Diddy, we had seen some of these before, but it was her just basically saying that she doesn't like getting pulled by the hair when he's high or he decides he wants to show his power. And then the defense had argued that they wanted to get in some more context because they said the government was misleading the jury by not including where Cassie said, I love to F-O when we both agree. So that came into play, or it was, I love our FOs when we both agree. So then we got to the last witness, and he will be the last witness in the government's case, Special Agent for HSI, Joseph Cerciello, who actually works in the Joint Terrorism Task Force, but he was specifically only working on this case to review the charts and evidence against all of the exhibits that the trial team had entered into evidence for this case. So it's a little mundane. The jury was yawning and kind of checking the clock. But this time around, we're looking at all the correspondences that really have to do with the Jane era. So we're seeing flights for Jane, different escorts, correspondences from Cowboys and Angels, phone records, between Diddy and escorts, and Cash App payments actually between Diddy and different escorts. And we saw some more room damages, and there were some notes there with these room damages. One was at the London hotel. There was bodily fluids on the wood floor. That's what the note said. Another one was they had cited towels were soaking in baby oil. And then another one was, it was just about $6,000 in damages. And this was the hotel, another hotel in Miami, the Bal Harbour Hotel. So that was pretty much it for today. Again, a half day, but the government should rest their case and end the day on Monday with the testimony of Special Agent Joseph Cerciello. So we'll see what happens. Thanks everyone for listening to this update. All right, everyone. That was your Diddy trial recap from week 6. Thank you so much for listening. Hopefully, you'll only get, 2 to 3 more of these from me. Let's hope 2. I mean, essentially, I do believe the jury will start deliberating before July 4th, but let's wait and see. All right, everyone. If you would like real-time updates, follow my channel on YouTube at Pop Crime TV, or you can also check me out on the Crime Junkie Jury YouTube page, as well as some of my reporting on Nancy Grace. All right, thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.